Hi there, this is Mark Killian. Welcome to Mark Killian's channel, where we're always learning. This week's episode, we're going to be looking at mastering for the soundtrack. Now, you may say, hey, if I've got a soundtrack deal, I send it to them, don't they master it? And you'd be right, they do. I'm talking about situations where you don't have a soundtrack deal in place, and you're going to be sending it to different soundtrack companies to see who's going to show interest or who's going to present you with the best deal or whatever the case may be. So you might be sending it to Perez or to Lakeshore Records or to Milan or whoever, and you're going to send a mock version of the soundtrack and say to them, hey, this is what the soundtrack will sound like. Are you interested? So you want to put your best foot forward. You want that to sound as decent as possible. Now, the one thing that we composers working in film, our sort of public enemy number one sometimes is relative volume management throughout the score. So if you're working on a chase scene or a fight scene, you're battling a lot of sound effects, everything's very loud, your music's going to be loud, and you're going to find that your cue is going to be printed pretty loud. If you're talking about a soft dialogue scene, you're going to find that your mix is going to be printed pretty low. And so, amongst other things, mastering is an attempt to bring everything up to a decent relative sound dynamic level for the soundtrack outside of the context of a film. So I've just finished a film called Official Secrets, which stars Keira Knightley and Ralph Fiennes, and I'm now in the process of mastering all the cues I've chosen to be on that soundtrack so that I can send it out. So we're going to get started with one of those cues, and it's a fairly long process. It can be tedious. I happen to enjoy it, but not everyone does. But so I'm going to dispense with the sort of minutiae of how does an EQ or what does a compressor do, all this stuff. I'm going to sort of just assume that you kind of know that stuff, and just to save time, because it's going to be a long episode anyway. So without further ado, grab yourself the beverage of your choice and let's get started. I've loaded in a track called Removing Header into Logic, and I'm going to set the markers so that I can go back and forth. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the filler G at the beginning. If you can hear, there's a 2-pop and a dialogue burst. I always put a dialogue burst at the beginning of every cue that I print, so that if the movie changes and the time code gets changed or it gets shifted to a different place, there's always a way of matching up a dialogue pop with the picture. So we don't want that now. I will scroll forth until I hear something there. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to put this at 9, and I'm going to go into the audio editor, and it's already started, so I'm going to go back a bit, catch the beginning. You can just start it from there and there will be no pop or anything. Okay, second thing you want to do is, this is an accurate wave readout. So we're far from 0. What we want to do is get this up to close to 0 as we can by changing the gain over here, and just look at the waveforms till the biggest waveform is kind of close to the edge there. You don't want anything to go to the edge or over it, just to the edge. Now it's going to be a whole lot louder, but now we're working at unity gain, so we've sort of reset the floor, as it were. Now what you'll see I have in my template here is every channel has a gain plugin, Logic's own gain plugin, an EQ, a multi-band compressor, and a limiter for the final. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable those 3 and go to the gain plugin first. In this plugin you could swing the balance. If you notice a slight discrepancy between left and right. You want to adjust that, you can do it. If you want to swap left and right in case your mix got printed wrong or whatever, you can do all that here. If we do any automation, which we might, I'm going to do it here in the gain plugin, not in the actual automation of the track. The reason being that once I've got the compressors and the and the limiter in there, you don't want to be lowering and upping their volume. You want the volume to be adjusted before it gets to compression. Let's have a look at that, because I can tell right away from the waveform, once we get into this part over here, it gets quite loud, and this is the loudest the whole track gets the whole way through. Sometimes when you're putting the soundtrack together, even though it wasn't appropriate for the film, for the soundtrack, for a listening experience outside of the film, it sometimes makes sense to adjust things a little bit, and I'm going to do that here. So the way I'm going to do it is open up the gain plugin, put it into latch mode for the automation, and let's have a go. I'm sort of reckoning, talking about maybe 3.5, something like that, just based on my ears. Take it out of latch mode, and let's have a look at that automation we just drew and make the adjustments we need to. So let's say we start off with 3.5, and then when we get here, this will go down, and we'll finesse that in a bit. This will go down to 0 because you adjusted this file to be as close to 0 as possible. So obviously you don't want to push it over 0 using this gain plugin. Right, so now we start from the beginning. Okay, so right away I can hear that the actual downbeat that we want to grab is there. So by that time we want to be back at 0, and this stuff is kind of opening up, so we want to drag this back to make it as gentle as possible. So let's see how that sounds. Okay, so in this case, it seems like the decrescendo should rather be here. By the time those bells, which are actually wine glasses, mostly full ones, not for long, we start a decrescendo here, and by the time those wine glasses come in, the decrescendo is done. Okay, that sounds pretty smooth. Okay, so now we have a good sort of template of the sound is matched between the beginning and the end. That adjustment is rough. We're going to finesse that with the compression and so forth. But the next thing we want to focus on is the EQ. And my favorite EQ is the Fab filter, Pro Q2. It just allows so many options and it's very visual. So what we're going to do is make adjustments just based on stuff that I hear that maybe, oh, there's a bit too much bass there, or a bit too much treble there, or that instrument is really irritating when it hits that frequency, let's cut that out. Stuff like that. It's a, I mean, all intents and purposes, it's equalization. So you want to equalize everything to sound more coherent. So one thing I'll often do, turn this down a bit, as you can see the curve over here. Most often you're going to want some spice up in the top, and it's very subtle. You see that shaker there? Just sort of opens it up a bit. I'm feeling like there's a little bit of a lack of mid-range somewhere around here as a general note to this cue. So I'm going to start bringing this up a bit and start seeing how it sounds. Okay, let's go back a bit. This is without it. That's with it. Just makes it a bit more present. It might be a bit much. Pull it down a bit. The name of the game is always subtlety. So let's go forth. Very rarely do you want to be changing things drastically, like anything more than 3 dB on any kind of frequency. You must really be asking yourself some serious questions about going that far. You're pretty much going to do that when you need to remove something that's bad, or if there's a real deficiency in the sound. But for the most part, you're just enhancing something by 1 or 2 dB here and there. It sounds good, but there's a bass, kind of a sub thing I'm missing here, so let's lift that up a bit. Find the frequency. There it is. So let's go back to like 2 dB, see how that sounds. I like it. There's more bass there. I'm maybe also missing just a bit of sub, the kind of sub you don't hear but feel. I'll lift it up to around 40 or something like that. Again, it's very subtle. You're really not going to get much of a difference if I A-B that. That's without it. That's with it. I like it up there. It kind of just fills the track out. Gives you that sub. Okay, so now we've got a profile that's pretty good as far as the EQ is concerned. Next thing is a multiband compressor. Now, I just have a preset on here that I've done a little adjusting to. It's pretty flat. It's just doing adjustments between 3 different frequency bands, and they're quite subtle. In a way, it's just a bit of a musher. It's just a bit of an equalizer that sort of just, you know, if I've got a couple of sounds that are a little brighter in nature, it might just bring them down a bit. And if it's feeling like there's a bit of bass lacking, it'll bring that up a bit. It's kind of a fix-it-all tool, you know, like in the Apple Photos tool, when you have that brush thing you can just click and it makes the photo look better. This is a little bit like that. I very rarely mess with it. I'm far too lazy for that. I just put it on, and usually it just does that subtle balance thing that I like. Okay, so now you can start seeing, you know, we're talking not even, you know, 2 dB at the most there, that it's adjusting the mid frequency. It's doing a little bit of adjustment on the bass there. It's taking it down a bit. I probably turned that bass up a bit too much, but that's okay. It's not doing anything to the top yet. There, it did a little bit, which makes me feel like I don't really want to raise that top up too much. I think it's fine. I would rather it were adjusting bass and mids than the top. Okay, now let's go forward to the loud part. See how that's pegging the meters. Okay, so the sound palette there is quite good. You might feel a little bit of pumping there, which is true, but I'm kind of going to compensate for that by turning on the final step in this process, which is the limiter. And what you want to do with the limiter, go straight ahead to your loudest part, which as you can see is coming up there, and adjust your gain to a point where you see the limiting start. And depending on the nature of the track, this is not, you know, rock and roll track with big drums and stuff, so we're not going to go too crazy. We do want to limit the big peaks, so watch out for these two peaks coming up. I'm going to set this so that it limits it by somewhere between, you know, 2 and 4 dB, nothing more than that. So we'll lift it up. Here's the loudest part. And on that loudest part it went up to just about 4. Okay, so all the percussion stuff is kicking the limiter in there, which is good. Let's see if this first big hit is hitting the limiter. Yep, about 2 dB. So that's pretty good. So let's go and have a look what it's doing at the beginning of the track, if anything. So it's not kicking the limiter here. Let's see what it does here. So you see it gets pretty close to 0. It's not going to get there again until the big stuff comes in. I'm pretty happy about that. I don't expect this first part to be kicking that limiter and reaching our loudest peak that we have in this track. So one more thing, I just want to listen through and make any final adjustments I feel might be necessary, especially on the EQ side. Could maybe get a little more high EQ sibilance out of this. Let's up this a little bit here and bring another node in here. There, that frequency. A little more of that. Not much. Not even 2 dB. Just brightens it up a bit. And I want to see what's going on here. I feel like just a little touch of that would be good. Let's see how it sounds going into the big part. Okay, so it's a little bit loud now because you've upped the EQ. Let's see what it's doing here. There we go. That's pretty good. You don't want to go any harder than that. That means that right there, at this first part, you're hitting the red, but only you're just tickling it, which is great. It doesn't hit the red again. And then when you start here, you're in the red. It's not compressing it too much that it flattens the track. Okay, so I'm feeling like maybe it's a tad too much. I'm just going to drop this down to 4.1 and call it a day. Alright, so all I'm going to do now is set my markers and bounce that puppy out, and that will be our master track that we're going to use for the soundtrack. This week, okay, let's see. Hello. Right, let's try that again. What am I trying to fucking say? What's that word? Hello, anyone home? What's that word? Oh. Ooh. Mum's home. No, scratch all that, that's bullshit. Alright, take number 395. By mastering. Fucking rats. Okay, I think I've had enough of this. You too.